Hip politics, baby.
Have you seen the cover art where it's like a white man with a big ass Drake?
Literally, yes.
I
That's
think-
what I'm talking about. That's what I want to get into. I want to like unpack that for a minute. Okay, so my setup was when I tell my guy friends Drake radio, they're like sigh, disappointment, right? Like completely let down these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get Rick Ross, who's calling him a white boy. My question to y'all is like, to me that feels like it stings on a whole nother level, like, because it's such a layered phrase, especially given, you know, Drake is biracial, Drake's not from the United States, he's not from the hood, he ain't driving a Chevy, like all of these things. So anyway, so I'm curious what you think about that strategy of calling him white boy, because you go back to Pusha T's lines, right? Pusha T brings in Adonis, he brings in, you know, Adonis's mother, right?
I think
Which
we're
are
talking
like
apples and oranges there, because Pusha T is not while he's a classic legendary artist, he's not in the conversation. He's very rarely putting out music. He's not doing anything relevant. Even with Rick Ross, his biggest hits are behind him. He's still putting out music, still jumping on.
No, I'm just
remixes.
talking about the insult.
No, so I'm saying
Right?
the insult, Pusha T's line don't hit because he's not as big. So it didn't, the megaphone, like you have to really be tapped into them for it to, the genius of Rick Ross is he's got a much bigger social media following. Mm-hmm. He's constantly out there, and he's known to be a funny dude.
You're comparing Ross to Push.
Push.
All right.
Which I'm not doing at all.
No, but that's why the white boy is sticking. It feels more visceral.
I do think visceral is a good term for it. 100%.
Visceral is it, but and I felt it was very visceral, and he says it, he emphasizes it, he punctuates it, and I'm asking, you know, okay, all right, let's get into politics. Let me relate this to, because this is hip politics. Let me relate it to politics. When you're in active war, right? Everybody has a doctrine, right? We grew up like with the Colin Powell doctrine. It was understood at one point to be that when you spot an enemy target, you overwhelm them with force. Pusha T, everybody coming, i.e. everybody coming for Drake, right? And what I was saying is Pusha T is coming at him in very typical ways. I'm going after your kid. I'm going after your girl. Like very typical stuff. And I thought Rick's was visceral, very focused and pointed. What I've learned about the Colin Powell doctrine, now that I've done a lot more research on it, his point was like, it's not even about overwhelming force. It's about going right at the source. And so for me, when he called him a white boy, that felt like he was going right at the source. You're in active war with somebody. I mean, like, listen, talking about your girl is not insulting anybody. I mean, you letting that roll off of you. He's had 15 or 20 since then, or whatever it is. That's an exaggeration to make a point. But to call him white boy, for me, felt like, oh, wow, he's coming at him in a way that's gotta hit a chord with Drake in a way that some of those other insults don't. Anyway, go. What do you think?
No, I agree with that. I also would say this, though, that the white boy attack is a attack that happens in the black community and has happened for a very long time outside of rap, beyond rap.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Like, you know, it's a common refrain in the hood to try to disparage a black person by calling them white.
If
So
you're
what are
doing
you
smart,
saying
I
when
was
you're doing
calling a
that,
white boy
though?
sometimes.
Okay,
So
but-
like you acting white, you
You
white
acting
boy.
white,
And so
yeah.
what are you
it's-
saying, though?
No, so what he's saying is like Drake. When you really think about what Drake is doing, because like I'm today I'm kind of repping both. Like I got my Drake OVO hat on, but I got my free bang gang.
Is that's like wearing Adidas with some
Nike.
Jordans, right? Like you're in
Checks over
violation.
stripes.
I've got my.
You're in
Drake-
violation.
I don't know, because I'm split. Like I think because the music, what the music means versus what it means culturally. Because I think with Drake going at him at the white boy, like talking about his nose, the way he looks in his appearance, you can tell Drake has had like he's an overconfident person now and has grown to that. But when you go back and look at early pictures of him like coming out of Degrassi, when even his first Cash Money, he looked very like Kanye-esque, like a button up with a hat and maybe one chain on. Like he started getting into his swag like 2-3 albums in, and then like when he really built his own merch line, then now in the last several years as he's been at the top, like he'll dress however he wants, like with high fashion, low fashion, whatever he wants at this point. And now that he has like a Nike brand and all these, and his clothing line is matured, when you think about what he was doing, like he was trying to fit in, like he's backed by gangsters, but he had to grow into like,
his blackness.
He will grow into that.
Is that what you're gonna call it?
Are you gonna call it like gangster blackness? Like
no. It's beyond that. You said swag, you said style, you said sense of self. Like all of that is can also be defined.
Like he grew into a rap star, but he also grew into like a gangster. Because like think about the types of his biggest backers are Jay Prince and Birdman. Come super from the streets, super hood. Very powerful now in a legitimate way, but using tactics and energy mired in like a kingpin street mentality. And that's who he's learning from. His direct boss of boss are those people. Like that's what he sees early. And you see that transition in his look, his appearance. So Rick Ross got with him then and saw that maturation. So I'm pretty sure when you start thinking about the futures, the Rick Rosses, the types of people, the Pusha T's, niggas who are really street through and through, who don't like him. It's like you a white boy, like you are. I'm not just even talking about your race. I'm talking about your like total detachment from being real, from being tough, from being strong.
Because you use the word authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a matter. It is a matter of authenticity. Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you on that. It is a matter of authenticity, but I think it's a very similar argument for when Rick calls Drake white boy to when people was going at Rose for being Officer Ricky, right? For being corrections officer, for being a cop, right? It's the same thing. Like, oh, you're not really authentic. You say you pushing weight. You say you the man in the streets.
Sure. It's like it's like to Colin Powell's point. It's like the very source of your weakness, your greatest vulnerability. And when you're in the midst of war, you go after your enemies. The source, that great.
I think that's why they're going at the things that hurt him most, because it's not much. You can't hit him with girls, so if anything, he's hitting them with girls.
Well, he makes light of himself on the issues of girls.
I mean, and he has no woman, like he has nobody, so he has no.
So
real
let's
allegiance.
let's break down.
Also, at some point in time, can we talk about women as a commodity in rap? I don't know. Maybe it's a different podcast. Maybe it's a different podcast.
Yeah, it is totally. But I did point out we're always the first victim. We're always when in a rap beef, it's always the women that get shot first. But let me just break down a couple. If you can humor me a little longer, break down another layer of this thing here. This idea of the white boy. So we've had as a nation, and this gets back to even our politics, the most traumatic decade, in the last almost generation of our generation. The murder of George Floyd comes to mind. I mean, that was an intense time. That was an entire global movement, uprising about the issue of Black lives, and specifically Black men, but definitely Black women as well. Okay, so when we talk about Drake as a white boy, I think back on that time, and like I'm a huge Drake fan, but I don't recall him ever doing any, and y'all correct me because y'all are the hip hop heads, any conscious rap album or track or anything that felt like he was engaged, tapped into the plight, not just in, because you could be of culture, but the plight of the culture. Anyway, so I just wonder if if that also gives credence to this fact that he's not one of us, he's one of them, he's white.
Drake is always going to be vulnerable to those type of attacks. One, he's half white. He is Canadian. No matter, even if he was from the blackest part of projects,
I think that's different. If he was black, if he was not biracial, dark skinned black, like there's gangsters in Canada.
I recognize that. But him being biracial and from Canada, and no one in Canada, man. Like don't know.
Well, and he was also an actor turned rapper. Right? He had a different trajectory.
I think his role. That's when you start. So also when you think about the visceral nature of like another thing Ross said was like, you ain't never owned a Chevy. To me, that was like the cultural insight of like telling a black man who got all this money, you never owned a Chevy. He's basically saying you never got an old school. Because like when you think about like, oh, if I win the lottery one day, you want to know your Ferrari or Lamborghini or Bentley or Rolls Royce, but you probably also dreamed about getting an old school, whether it's a muscle car, whether it's a Chevy, a box car, something on Dayton, something on 30-inch rims, like it's just a black man's dream when you go to any
So
hood
you're
in
basically
America.
saying, I mean,
So
people
you're not-
always question Drake's blackness.
They've always,
Of course.
And will always continue to,
And they always will.
yeah.
Hip politics, baby.